Today, we're joined by Tiffany, who is COO at Talkbase and co-founder of community OPServations.
We are a startup looking to build a platform for community operations.
Essentially, it sounds like Talkbase is there just to let community managers do the community management bit and just create the tools so you can get out of the way.
A lot of times with community management, you talk about the front of the house, which is, the engagement, you're moderating, you're speaking and working with your community members. But there's so much behind the scenes that it takes to run a community.
Hey, what was the origin story for the founders? Was it a case of scratching their own itch, or did they see kind of a gap in the market?
So Talkbase originally started as an event management tool. So it would have features that would allow you to pretty much rinse and repeat events from the operational perspective. Then we started talking. She actually spoke at one of my community observations meetups. She had this idea. She sparked it to her friend who is a developer, and that was kind of the start of Talkbase. So they immediately asked me to join as an advisor, as someone who has an operations background.
Tiffany, why don't you say hello? Hello and welcome to the Digital Community Managers podcast, where we chat with community managers, champions and founders about their experiences leading and supporting digital communities. My name's Pete Heslop and I lead the team here at Steadfast Collective, and we exist to craft digital applications that bring people together. We created the Digital Community podcast to be a bite-sized look into what it takes to start, grow and scale digital communities. Today, we're joined by Tiffany, who is COO at Talkbase and co-founder of community OPServations. Tiffany, why don't you say hello?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me, Pete. I'm really excited to be on the podcast today.
It's so good to have you here. Why don't you jump in and let us know a little bit about what you do for work and maybe how you got into community in the first place?
Yeah, thank you. So as you said, I'm currently COO at Talkbase. We are a startup looking to build a platform for community operations. So, a lot of times with community management, you talk about the front of the house, which is, the engagement, you're moderating, you're speaking and working with your community members. But there's so much behind the scenes that it takes to run a community. You're setting up the processes, you're setting up the tech stack, you're working on integrations and data and reporting, and then making sure that you have all the infrastructure so your community programs and your events are running well. And that's my area of expertise. I've been in community operations since 2017 officially. Unofficially before that, dabbled in customer success and customer support and onboarding and all that, and that was kind of my foray into community. And so Talkbase is looking to essentially make all of those back end things easier. So spending less time on doing all the setup and all that behind the scenes administrative, logistics, operational work, allowing the community managers to focus more on engaging with their members. So I've been there. I started there as a strategic advisor over a year ago. I was actually fully employed by a different company. And then I was affected by the community layoffs, just like a lot of other of my peers in the space. And then Talkbase asked if I wanted to join full time, and it was a great fit. So I jumped at the opportunity. And yeah, I am based in San Francisco. For fun, I love to do Orange Theory, which is a type of like gym workout, and walk my dog Yoshi and drink wine.
Nice. I like the Mario theme going on here.
Oh yeah, thanks.
With the background.
They're actually also on Velcro. Let me just show you a little sneak peek. So they're on Velcro, so you can move them around just like in the game.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Fantastic. So essentially, it sounds like Talkbase is there just to kind of let community managers do the community management bit and kind of just create the tools so you can get out of the way. What was the origin story for the founders? Was it a case of scratching their own itch, or did they see kind of a gap in the market?
Definitely a little combination of both. So Clara is the CEO and co-founder, and she has a community background, and so she felt the pains, mostly around event planning and event management. So from
Mm,
everything from speaker acquisition process to tracking all of the tasks to how to host it and where to host it and how to create an agenda that you can share with your attendees and collect registrations and all of that was taking time from her actually doing things with the community members. And so Talkbase originally started as an event management tool. So it would have
mm,
features that would allow you to pretty much rinse and repeat events from the operational perspective, taking time away from, the we have a speaker acquisition track where you can, organize reach outs and who you're having conversations with, and a speaker directory with public profiles where people can highlight, what their expertises are, what they're willing to talk about, and pictures and bios and things like that. Then we started talking. She actually spoke at one of my community observations meetups. And she was telling me that she had this idea. She sparked it to her friend at her birthday party, who is a developer. And that was kind of the start of Talkbase. So they immediately asked me to join as an advisor, as someone who has an operations background. She really wanted to focus on those aspects of the event management. We have tons of event tools out there, and so we were trying to work on differentiation of that with just like what are the mundane, repetitive things that everyone has to do when they're working on events. And then from there, it's evolved into community programs. We have a CRM module. We have an advocate program
mm.
module, so people can submit contributions that they're making to the community, and we can track that. And we have a couple other different features that are really just working to again make a community manager's life easier.
Nice. That's really good. Yeah, I was exploring it earlier, and yeah, I was really impressed. I really like the CRM for your community. It really really clicked and resonated for me, and the story of the kind of the founding story there as a British person from the south coast of England just sounded so San Francisco. Like it sounded so, like somebody had an idea at a birthday party. They met a developer. Like I was like, oh, it sounds like Silicon Valley. And then tell us a little bit about the community and the meetups that you're running.
Yes. So my community is called Community Observations. It's a little bit of a pun for observations for operations. And it was
Mm,
we founded it over almost 2 years ago. It's me and Cassie Mays, who's the lead community operations person for the Atlassian team. And we were introduced by my former manager, who also previously worked at Atlassian. And we thought we were alone in the space. We started talking and we are like, what are you working on? And it was a lot of the same thing. It was working on integrations, it was working on setting up our tech stack and our platforms and documenting processes, both for our community members front of house as well as supporting our community team members and stakeholders internally. And it was kind of an aha moment of, wow, we thought we were the only ones doing this, because in the space you hear about the engagement, the community building piece a lot, and you don't hear so much about
mm,
all of the things that people are doing behind the scenes. And so we decided to start this community. We do monthly or bi-monthly sometimes meetups, all centered around community operations. So we
mm,
talk about platforms, we talk about working on automations and scaling processes, and a lot of the community program management, and how we report on the health and value of the community, pulling data from all these different sources and putting it together in a consumable format. And so it's been really great. We've actually brought in a lot of people from the woodworks who were like, have done this. I didn't know it was community operations. And
mhm.
it's been a
Yeah.
really cool feeling to, bring together these people who are working day and night on building their communities, but it's something that isn't often talked about or highlighted. And so I think bringing operations to the forefront was a huge win for the community space. And we have over 300 members now, which is really, really cool.
That's really exciting.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Fab. Well, thanks for sharing your story so far. We're going to jump into some questions, and then
Okay.
we're gonna jump straight into some questions. So the first question I have for you is: in your experience, working at uh, as your role as kind of COO, but also co-founder of your community, um,
Mhm.
if you're looking at kind of tips and ideas to share with people, what is your number one tip for growth? And that growth might be in terms of numbers, or it might be in terms of, trying to in terms of like progression. So your goal as a community might not be to grow in size of actual physical numbers. It might be progression towards something. Um,
Mhm.
what would your kind of tips be towards that?
I think, yeah, as you mentioned, growth can sometimes be a nuanced term because there are gated communities that aren't looking to grow membership, but you can grow things like engagement or activity or, you know, even things like
Value.
outside of, yeah, value, or even outside of community specifically, things like product adoption or revenue
Mm,
or ARR. And so, but I think from an operational perspective, one of the things related to growth that I make sure to keep track of is looking at the projection and the forecast of certain processes that the community is doing, whether that's, maybe it's new user group
mm,
leader applications, or um, how, or even things with regards to budget, or certain processes, looking at them and forecasting, okay, well, if I'm currently reviewing 30 user group leader applications a month, and that takes me, you know, 10 minutes per application, and we're growing at a, 10% month over month rate with how many applications we receive. In 6 months down the road, I'm going to be spending X number of hours. I can't do math on the fly. X number of hours doing this. So maybe there
yeah.
should be a way to automate certain pieces of the process before it gets to that point. And so,
Hmm.
with regards to growth, I would say one of the things that I keep a lookout for is looking at the reporting, looking at the data, and then being strategic about, okay, this is how much I'm spending my time on, and I should be spending my time doing on other things. And these are the things I can work on automating. I think obviously with community management, you never want to automate everything. You need that personal touch. You need that relationship building and that rapport building with your community members. But there are, administrative tasks that really don't need to be taking up your time. And so for growth,
Yeah.
just to kind of circle back on that question, I do think it's more just like knowing your data, being able to forecast the needs and the wants and the future direction of the community and where it's headed, and being able to be prepared for those situations, if that makes sense.
Nice. So, really, as like you're the first person who has really spoken about community ops rather than like community management, which is really interesting and is like really exciting for me. And I'm intrigued to know from your point of view, at what it feels like somebody working in community ops can really help a community manager really thrive, because it kind of frees them of um like a lot of the processes and that kind of stuff. At what size community, or at what point do you think somebody should be thinking about bringing in somebody to help with ops as well as just their having their CM? It's kind of a
Yeah,
how
that's
long
a
is a
great
piece of
question.
string, but have you got any thoughts?
So, I've seen, and I actually do a lot of help in the community space on helping people find community operations jobs or hire for community
Mm,
operations roles. I do think it depends on the first hire. So typically, I do think it's important to bring in somebody who's really good with the engagement piece early on. That's kind of
mm,
the entry into the community. Community is nothing without its members, and so working on kind of the seeded content, the engagement campaigns, making sure there's constant contact, things like that. I do think the first community person does need to be operationally savvy to a certain extent, which I feel like most community people are, just by way of we don't have headcount or additional resources, so we have to
Yeah.
do a lot of the things ourselves. The point of bringing a dedicated community operations person in my experience that I've seen is when you start hitting that, I wouldn't call it product market fit for community, but when you kind of start hitting that pivotal moment of, okay, like we're pretty well established, we've gotten things going, we have programs running, but we're growing and it's taking time and we need some help figuring things out. I think also when you're
Okay.
working on more cross collaboration, so for example, if you're working with the product team on ideation in the community and you're working with marketing on events and you're working with customer support on case deflection and customer success on NPS and CSAT scores, bringing all of those stakeholders together and
Hmm.
being able to kind of show the value that community has on each of those teams, it's very operational in nature as well. So I think when the community gets to that point where there's activity going, the ball is moving on a bunch of things, you're starting to get more established both in the community externally, but as well as your internal stakeholders and partners. I think that's when a community operations person can bring a lot of value. And that's the kind of thing that a community manager doesn't really have time to do.
Yeah. Community managers are such wonderful generalists. They're so good at picking up, integrating software, and then they're able to send an email to someone who's having a really hard time in the same hour. And it always blows my mind how
I know.
quickly CMs can multitask and so on. And yeah, it's magic when they do that.
Yeah, I think I mean, I'm biased, but I think we're amazing people. I mean, even just in the community, like spaces, everybody is in there. They're helping each other. They're all friendly. They're all welcoming. They're all supportive. It's just, it's a special kind of person to be a community manager and be in community.
Have you seen any roles for like fractional community ops managers?
Hmm.
That feels like something that will happen at some point.
Yeah, I do see quite a bit in the space, and I feel like it's actually more so just because of the recurring um, blockers that we have in the community space of just like lack of headcount and lack of resources. Is people are
Mm,
kind of forced into a fractional community operations manager role,
sure.
not so much because of want, but just because of need.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay,
Hmm.
fab. So moving on to the next question, we are looking at what would your number one tip be for engagement and trying to get people really excited about the community, involved, that kind of stuff. Like, what's your go-to tips and tricks for this?
Yeah, great question. So engagement doesn't necessarily fall into operations. So this is something that I have done, but obviously is not usually my day job. Now
Yeah.
at Talkbase, I am doing a lot of the engagement pieces of it, and I would say finding a perfect balance between the automation and the personal touch. And so,
Mm,
for example, even just welcoming new members into the community, we have automation that triggers when we're notified. And then I actually, right now, we are still very early stage. And so and we are a gated community. So I actually have the ability to look at them and be like, oh, yeah, this is a friend, like, and, send a personal welcome message.
mm,
However, I do think that, as you grow and scale, maybe finding the source of where that person came from, or when they are joining, and then being able to customize a message that's sent in an automated fashion. Same thing with onboarding. I think setting the scene at the very beginning of your community's relationship with that new member is very important and sets a precedent for how they see the community, how they work on engaging in the community, and kind of, it's kind of like a first impression when you go like on a date. is, you're kind of setting the scene for the future of the relationship or
Mm,
lack of relationship. And so you want to kind of make sure that they feel welcome, that there's relevant content for them, and that they can see a future and benefit of staying in the community. And then the rest of the, from an engagement perspective, I do think it's being able to segment your members and being able to provide relevant
mm,
content for them. And I am a big fan of kind of like the recognition as well. So if I see someone who is going above and beyond and responding to a bunch of people in the community or helping other people, or if they have a certain area of expertise that they've been talking about in the community, highlighting them and sending a personal note of thank you, or hey, you're doing a great job, or hey, I'm finding your content really interesting, kind of motivates them
mm.
to keep coming back. And then also from an engagement perspective, if they fall off, if you don't see them, in the community, or they were super active and all of a sudden you don't see them, not doing a note of like, hey, we noticed you haven't been around lately. Like, are you okay? But doing something, personable, like,
Yeah.
tagging them in a relevant thing that you're like, oh, hey, so and so, I know you were talking about this earlier. Like, this might be
Mm,
interesting for you, or dropping a note and being like, hey, like, I'm going to, like you're in London. I'm like, I'm going to London in a couple of weeks. Like, would love to meet up for a coffee chat or something like that. So I do think there's a ton of different ways to engage, but it depends on your audience, your relationship with the community member, and kind of what you want your goal to be for your community. Engagement is awesome, but if it's just like superfluous engagement, maybe you want to work on tailoring your messaging, your comms, and kind of like redirecting the engagement in your community to, do whatever your community was supposed to do, whether it's networking or case deflection or, what have you.
mm. Nice. So I really liked the split there between having things that are automated and things that are personal. And I really like tools which allow you to do that kind of middle ground where maybe um, it's not going to automatically send a message to someone saying, "Hey, I didn't see you, haven't been around for a while," but it will alert you and be like, "By the way, this person hasn't been around for a while," or "Did you know that, by the way, Tiffany is your number one active person this week? Did you want to message her and say thanks?" And I think as you grow and scale, you'll start missing stuff. People will slip out of the community, and it will just slip your mind, and you'll go away on vacation for a week. You'll come back, and you'll kind of forget they even existed. And having tools in place that are automated are great, but it does feel very generic. But tools which are semi-automated allow you to be alerted when things are happening, but then don't necessarily, they then let you then take a personal approach because you probably do know that person personally and can personalize it for them.
Yes, and to that point, I think that's why like operations is so important, because we're the ones who are working on building those reports and those dashboards that can actually
Yeah.
help show some actionable insights. So, everyone is talking about, oh, what's the ROI of community? What's the value of community? And that's all fine and dandy, but if you have you have to create the reports and the dashboards, and then you see all these numbers and you're like, what does that mean? What do I do with it? And so I
Yeah.
think being able to craft the reports in a way that you can actually see, like, oh, these are the people who have fallen off recently, or these are the new people. Or these are some trends that are happening in the community. What's the next step? What do you do from there?
Mm,
And so I think that's something
mm.
that is really important to keep an eye out and remember as you're looking at the reports and dashboards every day.
Nice. In Talkbase, do you have those kind of trends built into the platform? Because obviously you have the CRM side of things. Do you have things like trends?
It's on the roadmap.
Okay. Okay. I'm sure there's lots of things on the roadmap.
We are working on it. That's top of mind. There are lots of things on
Okay.
the roadmap. We are actually launching some insights fairly soon, and then from that, we're looking on building based off of certain triggers, and notifications based off of those triggers. So we're slowly getting there. Excuse me. It's something that I'm actively thinking about, and we're trying to build.
That's really great. And on that kind of topic, obviously I feel like community tech is becoming a more and more crowded market, which you must be aware of as a company.
Hmm.
Um, kind of how what What are you trying to do to make sure that you're keeping a sharp edge, a differentiator between you and what everyone else is trying to do in that kind of community CRM kind of space?
Yeah, great question. So I know that there are a ton of other platforms and tools out there. I do think that a lot of them work complementary to each other, even though they might be portrayed initially as competitors or competing platforms. I think the scope of different communities out there is so varied, from the platform that
Mm,
you're running to whether you're a B2B or B2C community to what is the intent of your community. Excuse me. And so I think from Talkbase's perspective, we're not necessarily trying to be that consolidator of like, oh, well, let's see what, Twitter and LinkedIn and Slack and all of the different places, and bringing it in together. We know our bread and butter is, Slack and Discord communities, SMBs and startups. And what we're trying to do, number one, I think the operational component is very unique as well. But then there's little features sprinkled throughout the product that are things that I feel like people take for granted in their daily operations, but it adds a lot of value when they realize that they have it. So, for example,
mm,
you have your CRM. There's so many CRMs out there. That's cool. But we have a feature that will allow you to request profile details from your contacts within your CRM. So let's say you're missing someone's birthday, or you want to send them something and you want
mm.
their address, or you want to know, if they would be willing to speak. You have those fields in your CRM, and you can actually push send request, and you can select which fields, and I'll send an
That's
email to them saying like, "Hey, Tiffany
very
from
cool.
Talkbase, wanted to get your birthday. Like, would you mind filling it out?" They can fill it out, and then it automatically updates their contact profile in your CRM.
I want that in my CRM system.
Right? Like, it's really
I
cool, and you
want
don't
that.
really think about it.
Yeah.
You're just like, "Oh, I'm missing this info."
Like the amount of times it would be so great if we could, yeah, if I could just be like, I would love all of our clients' birthdays so we could send cards and stuff,
Mm,
but I only have a few of them because, you kind of catch it when you can. It's not the sort of thing you ask on a first meeting of someone. And that's great. I like that. That's the sort of thing that gives a community manager a superpower, like under the hood.
right.
Because you ask for it once and
Mhm.
the next year it's complete surprise and delight when they can then jump in. Um, yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Or even like, making sure that the data in your CRM is not stagnant. So maybe it's once a year sending an email out and being like, "Hey, did you move or change jobs or,
Hmm,
get promoted?" We'd love to like have your
it's good.
updated info and be able to just have them fill it out directly. And then we have another feature that allows them to create a public profile based off of the data in the CRM, and they can have photos, they can have a bio, they can have certain other, information that they want selected as, and then it's created as a kind of like a speaker profile. So not only do you
Nice.
benefit because you have somewhat of like a speaker directory, but they have a tool too where they can just share their speaker link and share it with
Yeah.
other people. And it kind of becomes a, not like a portfolio of sorts, but like a speaker
Yeah.
bio, kind of like a speaker resume of sorts. And so kind of little things like that, that just like you don't really
Yeah.
think about on a day to day, but when it's there, it's like, wow, this is a really really cool tool.
That is great. That's great. Yeah, and it does feel like that is great. Yeah, I love that. That is great. That's a great answer. Good job.
Thank you. It was on the spot, so I'm glad I did well. Yeah, there's some amazing tools out there, and I do think that trying to be an all in one tool is just reinventing the wheel in a lot of ways. And so, what we're trying to do is really think about the aspects that are current pain points for community managers that doesn't necessarily exist yet, and trying to fit in that way, because we don't want to compete with other people who have been around longer and are doing it better. But we do feel like there's a very unique value add that Talkbase can bring to streamline operational components of your everyday job.
Nice. Fab. So, from the last 12 months, what has been the biggest challenge for you, uh, whether it's at kind of Talkbase or at your community or kind of whatever that is? What's been the biggest challenge you've been dealing with?
Yeah. Well, so I was laid off from my role as director of community operations at Venify back in
Mm,
December. And that community was there were definitely challenges. It was a um, community for a cybersecurity company that does like web certificates and things like that. And it
okay.
was a gated community for customers only. And there were a lot of sensitivities and concerns about privacy and just, things in the cybersecurity industry that I think were very, very tough to navigate. That coupled with the fact that we were a gated community for customers only limited the number of people that we could bring in. And we
Mm,
had certain competitors in there. They didn't want to share any content because they didn't want to show their security gaps or vulnerabilities. So I
mm,
think cultivating engagement and the want to share with other people in that community was fairly difficult. So I think that was within the last 12 months. And then also I think with with all of the community teams and community managers who are impacted by layoffs, I think that poses a completely new challenge of the future of community. So I think, as the economy starts to balance back out and hiring starts to begin again, I think we kind of made a step back in terms of the role of a community manager. These days, I do see
mm.
community manager roles. That's cool. But I see more social media community management than
Which is
before.
step back. Yeah.
Which is a step back because we saw that we worked so hard on being like, hey, no, we're not social media people. Give us
Yeah.
like this is what community is. And then now it's kind of,
Yeah.
unfortunately regressed a little bit from what I've seen. I think also now, as we're working on hiring, people are going to need to be more operationally savvy because they're not going to be able to hire designated community operations people. And
Hmm.
so being able to balance that front of the house and back of the house, I think is going to be an important skill set that people work on because they might not have the resources or the headcount or even the support internally to build some of the things. And so I think they'll need to be able to put on their operations hat more. And so I think
Yeah.
that's not necessarily a personal challenge, but something that I've been seeing in this space that I think will be a challenge going forward and has been a challenge for the last 12 months as well.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's really good points there. And then looking forward to the next 12 months, what does the next 12 months
Mm.
look like? What are you excited about? What's going on in the world of Tiffany?
Top of mind right now, and you might be interested in this, Pete, is we are hosting a community conference in Europe. We have a couple of community conferences around the world. Obviously, CMX Summit is one of the main ones, and that's here in
Hmm.
California. There's a Swarm conference in Australia. But I think one of the things that we were lacking is an in person community get together in Europe. Talkbase is
Yeah,
headquartered
come
in
on.
Prague, so we are hosting a full-fledged community conference. It's going to be June 12th and 13th. And we have some amazing speakers. We're expecting about 200 people to come. I'm just really, really looking forward to that.
That does sound amazing.
Yeah.
That sounds really good.
Invite your team. Obviously, we'd love to have you there too. And then I think from just other than that, in the next 12 months, I think I'm just interested in seeing how the economy bounces back. And I know that,
Mm,
it was very hard just seeing every single day on LinkedIn and in the community spaces, more and more people were, being affected by the
yeah.
layoffs. I think um, I really tried to, like, I shared my story publicly. And, I've had a lot of conversations with people who are like, I'm so embarrassed and I'm ashamed. Like, what did I do wrong? And just establishing that it wasn't their fault. It's not only community people who are getting let go, and that's why it's really important to be able to show the impact and the
Yeah.
value that the community is bringing to the company. But
Yeah.
I want to see more roles open up. I want to see communities start to build again, and then I want
Mm,
to I've never really witnessed anything like that before, especially since community is such a small space. A lot of people know each other, and so I'm very curious to
Yeah.
kind of just see how it balances back out.
Yeah, likewise, it's been wild, and I think for our point of view as a software company, what we've noticed that's
Hmm.
been really wild is seeing the big tech companies and the smaller tech companies just stop hiring to start with. Normally, your giants of tech are just hiring anyone who has a pulse, basically. But also then just seeing these huge layoffs, which are devastating, and they don't only affect those people, they affect everybody else, because if you've got all of these really fantastic senior developers or community managers coming back into the market, it then makes it instantly harder for your juniors coming into the workplace. It becomes harder for everyone because people are willing, if there's 1,000 people who need one job, everyone's willing to kind of cut back on maybe what they're expecting, and then it becomes harder for juniors to enter, and it all becomes just a bit of a mess because it's all at once. It wasn't like, this company did it, then this company did it. It was like you said, it was every day in the news. It was relentless. It was really difficult.
Yes.
So yeah, looking forward to watching that bounce back, which it will do. It's just obviously hard for the people who are involved. So yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you said, and I think you're even seeing it like for the very few community roles that are going out. You're a junior community manager with a couple of years of experience, and you're competing with all of these people who have way more years of experience than you, are working with different communities, and how are you supposed to compete with that? So I
Yeah.
I, I do um, I do see that as a challenge for people in the space. And there's so few roles that it's just like everybody competes for everything right now. And
Yeah,
you're
for
competing with
sure.
some friends too, because the community space is so small.
Definitely. Fab. Well, it's been so good having you on as a guest, and I've really enjoyed your background as well. It's such a good, it's so good, your background. But yeah, I've really enjoyed listening to you and having your input on growth, engagement, but also chatting a little bit about what's kind of coming up. And the conference sounds amazing. So if people want to find out more about what you're doing or what's happening um, kind of at Talkbase, what's the best place for people to find out more?
Yeah, I am on LinkedIn and Twitter. It's at Tiffe Oda. So feel free to connect and reach out. Please, if you're in Europe or not in Europe, anywhere in the world, really, come to the conference. It's communityrebellionconference.com. And we're Talkbase is also on LinkedIn. So feel free to just give us a follow.
Wonderful. Cool. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll be back next time with another Community Managers podcast. Thank you.